Hello, I'm Admiral Bumblebee, and today I'm about 45 pounds heavier than the last video, but I'm drinking some tea out of a mason jar, and I'm here to talk about DAW, jitter, and latency. If you remember the last video about PreSonus' Studio One, it did pretty terrible. It had MIDI input jitter, it forgot the offsets for every single MIDI note. It was kind of disgusting. But today I'm going to talk about all other DAWs, the Studio One 5.1 update, and we're going to talk about why this matters and what's happening. So what is latency? Well, we input some data into the system, and the time it takes to get data out, that's latency. And jitter is a variation in latency. If each input-output cycle has a different latency, then it has jitter. In this video, I'm only talking about the type of jitter or latency that affects live MIDI input that triggers some sort of synthesizer, sampler, or MIDI output. But why is this a problem in this specific circumstance and not in others? This graphic does not represent MIDI notes on a timeline, it represents a stream of MIDI notes going into your DAW. But DAWs do things in buffers. And this is where the problems happen. As you can see, the note onsets do not align with the buffer onsets. So for each buffer that we process, we need a way of saying this MIDI note is this far away from the beginning of the buffer. But there's a problem here. If we send off all our buffers to the audio plugins for processing, and then MIDI happens during the buffer, we can't just rewind time and start that buffer all over again, or nothing would ever get done. So we add an extra buffer to give us a little extra time to make those MIDI offsets align with all our audio processing. And now we have a split. We have DAWs that completely ignore the MIDI offset data and just send MIDI as fast as it can at the onset of each buffer. And then we have DAWs that have extra buffers so that they can properly place the MIDI notes offset by the buffer time. And then we have DAWs that have extra latency and still have that jitter from no MIDI offsets. So how can you test it? Well, Plug Bidule has a MIDI monitor plugin that will tell you if the offset is properly being communicated. Or you can do what I did, and I tested this by sending MIDI out of a little microcontroller into Complete Audio 6, and then I used the sampler in the various DAWs, if it was available, or Contact or mDrummer, to play back a one sample pulse, and then I tapped the output after the microcontroller and after the interface. I could then measure the latency, measure it multiple times, dump the data from my oscilloscope, and then make pretty graphs, which are all over admiralbumblebee.com. The DAWs with jitter are Pro Tools September 01, FL Studio 20.7, Digital Performer 10.13, Waveform 11.1, and the latest Cubase 11.0. The DAWs without MIDI input jitter are Ableton Live 10.1, Bitwig 3.2, Mixbus 6.1, Ardour 6.3, Logic 10.5, Reaper 6.1, and the latest Studio One 5.1, where they fixed it after my last video. Great job, PreSonus. Some of the no jitter DAWs had a lot less latency than others, and some DAWs with jitter had the lowest latency of any of the competition. If you want a bunch of pretty charts and hundreds of tests with all the raw data available for you to mess with yourself, and my observations about what's happening, head to admiralbumblebee.com, where you have text-based articles with videos and graphs and all that wonderful stuff. Look for the DVD 72 series. But for this video, I want to make it short, give you the general overview, and we're good to go. Thanks for watching.